more on this, let's bring in Ben Norton, an investigative journalist and editor of Geopolitical Economy Report. He joins us live from Nicaragua. Ben, thank you very much for talking to us. Well, those protests have already started, but we've been here before, haven't we? They've been tried before and failed. So what can be hoped from these protests this time round?
Well, I think what we're seeing is quite similar to what we saw a few years ago, where essentially the countries in Latin America will be divided between those that recognize President Nicolas Maduro and those that back the opposition. And the US State Department has already made it clear that it's not going to recognize President Maduro. Antony Blinken said that in statements on the night of the election. This is similar to what we saw in 2017 when there was something called the Lima Group that was created, which essentially, I mean, the easy way to understand it is it's on political lines. The right-wing governments in the region refuse to recognize Maduro, and the left-wing governments largely have recognized the government. This is really very similar to previous elections. Really, for over a decade now, in every single election, the opposition in Venezuela has claimed that there was fraud, and they haven't really presented evidence of that. In fact, in this election on July 28th, there still is no evidence, and it basically becomes a he said, she said. The opposition cites polls that they did with their own firms, like Data Analysis, which is an opposition-run firm, and then the government has said that they won with 51% of the vote. So unfortunately, it seems like there's going to be more political instability in the days to come.
And Ben, what does this apparent win by Maduro mean for Venezuela, given the current state of the economy in the country at the moment?
Well, it's not that surprising. There were a lot of polls done by other firms in Venezuela, like, for instance, the main polling firm, which is Interlaces, which basically predicted exactly what the results ended up being, that Maduro won 51% and that Edmundo González won around 44%. So that's not surprising. Again, in Venezuela, a lot of the polling firms that are linked to the opposition tend to have very politically motivated firms, and they're the ones claiming that supposedly González won with 70%. But again, they've said this in every single past election. Now, what's different is that in recent years, Venezuela has been economically recovering. It has GDP growth this year of between 5% and 8%, which actually makes it probably the fastest growing economy in the region. And we should also keep in mind that Venezuela did have very serious inflation. I've been to Venezuela several times reporting on it, and one of the biggest problems people always cited was the very high rates of inflation. And now, actually, Venezuela has one of the lower rates of inflation in the region, especially compared to countries like Argentina, which has annual inflation of around 200%. So in Venezuela, the economy has stabilized. The political situation until recently had been much more stable. And let's not forget that in 2019, the Donald Trump administration essentially tried to impose a new government on Venezuela, recognizing this little-known opposition figure, Juan Guaido, as the supposed president of the country, despite the fact that he never participated in a presidential election. Keep in mind that Venezuela is under right now one of the most aggressive sanctions campaigns in modern history, with over 900 different unilateral coercive measures that have been imposed by the US and some European countries. So what we really see geopolitically is that the US and Europe have backed the opposition in Venezuela, but already China and Russia have come out saying that they recognize Maduro's victory, and many countries in the global south, which represent the global majority, have backed the Venezuelan government or have been neutral.
Ben, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Ben Norton, speaking to us live there from Nicaragua.